Good evening, everyone. Welcome, Jens, Gita, Yasmin, Ron, Bradley, Lilia, and of course, welcome to Bhante Sudato, who is sharing once again the Dharma with us. Sadhu, 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 after a day of hard work. So it's great that Bhante has so much patience. And in fact, he will be sharing his secret of developing his secrets and how he develops so much patience this evening. But before that, we will be chanting the Ratana Sutta. And then after that, Bhante will be leading us in meditation. And then he will be sharing words of Dhamma on patience. All right? And welcome to Yulia as well.
Okay, so we'll chant the Ratana Sutta together. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Yani bhutani samagatani bhummani vayani vantaleke. Sabbe bhuta sumana bhavantu atopi sakacha sunantu bhasitam. Tasmahi bhutani sameta sabbe metam karota manusiya pajaya. Devacharato chaharanti evaling tasmahi nerakata apamatam. Yankin shivitam nitavahuram vasage suvayam ratanam panitam. Nano samangati tathagatena idampi buddhe ratanam panitam. Etena sachena subhati hotu. Kayang viragam amatang panitam yadajagasa kyamuni samahito. Natena dhammena samati kinchi edampi dhamme ratanam panitam. Etena sachena subhati hotu. Yang Buddha seto parivannai suching samadhimanandari kanyamahu. Samadhinatena samona vinjati dampi dhamme ratanam panitam. Etena sachena subhati hotu. Ye bhungala tasatang pasata chatari etani yugani honti. Te dakineya sugata sasavaka ete sudinnani mahapalani. Idampi sankhe ratanam panitam etena sachena subhati hotu. Yesu payutta manasa dalhena nikamino gotamasasanam hi. Te patipata amatang megaiha lantamutanim bhutim punjamanam. Idampi sankhe ratanam panitam etena sachena subhati hotu. Tindakilo pataving sito siya chatu private via sampakampiyo. Tatu pamang samburisam vadami yo arya sachani avechapasati. Idampi sanghe ratanam panitam etena sachena subhati hotu. Ye Arya Sachani Vibhavayanti Gambhira Panyena Sudesitani Kinchapi Te Honti Bhusapamata Nate Bhavangata Manadiyanti Idampi Sanghe Ratanam Paritam Yetena Sachena Subhati Hotu Sahava Sadasana Sampadaya Taya Sudhamma Jahita Bhavanti Sakaya Deti Vichike Chitancha Silabhatam Vapiyadati Kinshi Chatuhapaye Chavipamuto Chachabhitanani Abhabbo Katum Idampi Sanghe Ratanam Panitam Yetena Sachena Subhati Hotu Kinchapi Sokam Karoti Papakam Kayena Vacha Udacheta Sava Abhambo Sota Sapati Chadaya Abhambata De Tapada Sabutam Idampi Sanghe Ratanam Panitam Yetena Sachena Subhati Hotu Vanapagumbe Yatha Pusitange Gimhanamase Batamasmin Gimhe Tatupamang Dhammavaramgade Sainim Banagaming Paramang Hitaya Idampi Buddhe Ratanam Panitam Yetena Sachena Subhati Hotu Varo Varanyu Varado Varaharo Anutaro Dhammavaramgade Sai Idampi Buddhe Ratanam Panitam Yetena Sachena Subhati Hotu Kinam Puranam Navam Nati Sambhavam Virata Chitta Yatike Bhavasmi Tekina Bija Virulhin Chandanim Bante Hirayatayam Paripo Idampi Sanghe Ratanam Panitam Yetena Sachena Subhati Hotu Yani Bhutani Samagatani Bhummani Vayani Vantaleke Tathagatam Deva Manusa Pujitam Buddham Namasama Subhati Hotu Yani Bhutani Samagatani Bhummani Vayani Vantaleke Tathagatam Deva Manusa Pujitam Dhammam Namasama Subhati Hotu Yani Bhutani Samagatani Bhummani Vayani Vantaleke Tathagatam Deva Manusa Pujitam Sangham Namasama Subhati Hotu Etena Sacha Vanjena Dukavo Pasamentu Te Etena Sacha Vanjena Vayavo Pasamentu Te Etena Sacha Vanjena Rogavo Pasamentu Te. Okay, so you can get into meditation posture. So there's meditation posture, and then there's everything other than full lotus. So please put your body in meditation posture. Even if your back is sore from working in the garden all day, please make sure to sit upright, very stable position. cultivating energy, settling into stillness. Taking a few deep breaths to help settle the body and mind. Bringing the mind to rest in the body. Alert, non-reactive, and peaceful. Doing nothing, wanting nothing, expecting nothing. Just closely watching each arising moment with serenity and clarity. Not chasing anything that appears, yet not ignoring anything that appears. watching sensations, thoughts, emotions flowing through the mind. Without latching on to any of them, without getting involved in any of them, just letting them flow through the mind. Never ending stream of experiences flowing through the mind. We watch it with attentiveness, but without attachment. Relax your posture.
Thank you, Bhante, for guiding us in meditation. And welcome to some other friends like Rich, who says, I'd like to call my posture aging broken lotus. And welcome to Stacy, Adriana, and Einat, who says, so grateful for this daily oasis. Oh. Leah, welcome to Edward, and Carol. All right, and I'll pass it on to Bante. So once again, the theme this evening will be on patience, and Bante has lots of interesting things to say. So we'll see.
Well, Ayasoma of all people knows about my tremendous patience.
And welcome also to Elaine and Marielle. All right.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Well, good evening, friends. So we're continuing with our series on the 10 parami. And the parami for today in Pali is called khanti. That's spelled Khanti, khanti. While it's commonly translated as patience, this word has several different connotations. And depending on the context, it can be translated in several different ways. And patience is one of the main uses of this word, one of its main meanings. But some of the other major uses that it has are endurance. So to endure is also khanti. Acceptance is also khanti. Tolerance is also khanti. Forgiveness is also khanti. So this word has all these different meanings. It means patience, it means endurance, it means acceptance, it means tolerance, and it means forgiveness. So I'd like to talk about all of these aspects of the word tonight. So rather than just focusing strictly on patience, I'd like to talk about this whole range of meanings to this word. But first I'd like to quote the Buddha, because it's always good to quote the Buddha. Very famous Dhammapada verse where the Buddha says, Khanti paramang tapotiteka. He says, Khanti is the paramount spiritual practice. Khanti is the highest form of spiritual practice. So patience, endurance, acceptance, tolerance, forgiveness. This is the highest form of spiritual practice. Similarly, there was a time when people asked Ajahn Chah what the most important quality is in monastic life. What's the most important quality to develop in monastic life? And he answered khanti. So patience, endurance, acceptance, tolerance, forgiveness. This is the most important quality for monastic life. So it's not something to be swept aside lightly. It's something that really warrants careful consideration, careful thought, and careful integration into our lives. So first off, taking the common meaning of patience. So patience is the willingness to allow things to unfold in their own way, in their own time. So a classic simile that's used for this, and this is another Ajahn Chah simile, but I recently found out that there's also an Italian idiom which is almost identical. So Ajahn Chah said that trying to hurry along one's practice is like trying to make a plant grow faster by tugging on it, by like pulling up on the plant to try to make it grow faster. So patience is recognizing that it takes time for plants to grow. It takes time for plants to get bigger. It takes time for them to produce fruit. It takes time for the fruit to ripen until eventually the time is ready and the fruit will just come off in your hand. So patience is allowing things to unfold in the time that they need. Not trying to rush things faster than they can happen. So patience is a very important quality in Buddhist practice because much of our Buddhist practice is sowing seeds, not harvesting. Most of it is sowing seeds. We're sowing seeds of kindness, hoping that someday they'll result in a naturally gentle, joyful mind. We sow seeds of samadhi. Even though our mind seems scattered and restless and unfocused, we keep sowing seeds of samadhi. Until one day, you'll sit down to meditate and you'll realize your mind is already unified. It's already stabilized. We sow seeds of wisdom. We read the suttas, we listen to Dhamma talks, we reflect on their meaning. We try to see that meaning in our experience. But nonetheless, we keep going around doing stupid things. We keep feeding unwholesome mind states. We keep doing unwholesome activities. And we keep perceiving the world incorrectly. Until one day, things will start to come together in the mind. We'll start to understand what the Buddha was talking about, and we'll start to see the world as it is, rather than as we think it is. So we keep sowing the seeds without worrying about when they're going to ripen, without worrying about how long it's going to take for them to grow, without worrying about when the results are going to come. We just keep sowing the seeds and nurturing them patiently, persistently, knowing that one day we'll reap the fruits. And it doesn't matter when, it doesn't matter how long it takes. We'll let it take however long it takes. We're not concerned with how long it's going to take. We're just concerned with patiently, persistently nurturing the seeds. So this is patient. It's the willingness to allow things to take however much time they take. Second major aspect of khanti that I wanted to talk about is endurance. So this is when we're faced with unpleasant or challenging or painful circumstances. And in that situation, often there's nothing we can do about it. So all too often what we find ourselves doing is that then we get upset, we get irritated, we get annoyed, we get angry. We rail about the injustice of it all. We lament about how annoying it is. Or we just sit there and stew in silence, rolling over in our mind how much we hate this or we hate that or we hate those people or we hate that political party or we hate that situation or whatever. We just keep feeding our aversion and resentment and hostility. Or we try to space out, we try to blank out rather than face the situation. Instead, we fantasize or we drift off in a haze, or we let the mind go dull and sleepy. But none of that's doing us any good. All of that's just feeding our defilements. So endurance is facing our present moment condition with serenity. So this is not quite the way we often think about endurance. Sometimes we think about endurance as like gritting our teeth and bearing it, like, oh, this is so awful, but I will deal with it. Well, no, that's not endurance. That's just aversion. I know it's better than nothing. It's better than throwing a tantrum, I suppose. But it's not quite khanti. It's not quite the wholesome quality that we're talking about. So endurance is facing the situation. It's like, yeah, my back hurts, but I can deal with this. It's okay. I can endure this. Yeah, someone I don't like is talking to me, but I can endure this. I can face it with serenity. So this becomes quite significant as one gets older and one's body is filled with more and more aches and pains. We need to learn how to face that with serenity. So there's basically two kinds of old people. There's the grumpy, grouchy old people that nobody likes and nobody wants to be around. And there's the sweet, kind old people who everybody adores. So which kind do you want to be? Well, if we're not willing to face our aches and pains with serenity, then that grumpiness and grouchiness will keep building up within us until eventually nobody wants to be around us. But if we're willing to face our condition as it is and accept it as it is, then we find the mind keeps getting sweeter with age. As time goes by and we peacefully endure hardships and difficulties of life, then what builds up within us is an incredible gentleness, softness, and flexibility of mind. So this is closely tied to the next two qualities. So the next quality I wanted to speak about is acceptance. So acceptance is accepting the way things are, accepting our circumstances, accepting our conditions, accepting the present state of our body and mind. That doesn't mean that we give up on trying to change things. So if there's a problem, then of course we should try to change it. And there's actually a monumental problem glaring us right in the face, which is the fact that we're not enlightened. So yes, we should definitely try to change that. And also more ordinary problems. For example, if there's no vegetables in your refrigerator, then you don't just accept it like, oh, well, I guess there's no vegetables, I'll just starve. No, you figure out a way to get some vegetables, it's fine. But acceptance is turning to face our present moment circumstances without shrinking away from it, without turning away, without ignoring, without suppressing, but accepting this is the way things are. This is also an important aspect of learning and studying the Dhamma, is that if one sincerely studies the Buddha's teachings, then you will periodically come across things which you don't want to accept. But as we look at them, we come to realize, no, actually the Buddha knew what he was talking about. I can't ignore this. I can't pretend it's other than it is. We have to come to terms with it. One place where this often comes up is around karma. We really don't like the idea that we're responsible for what we're experiencing. And yet, once we accept that, a sense of incredible freedom and potential opens up in the mind. Once we're willing to accept that I am the architect of my experience, once we accept responsibility for what we're going through, then we also take on the ability to shape our future. So accepting our present moment condition is what gives us the power to shape our future condition. This is another aspect of khanti, acceptance. The fourth aspect I wanted to talk about is tolerance. So this is something that's very important in monastic life. So in monasteries, you'll often find yourself living with people who you wouldn't necessarily pick, who you wouldn't necessarily choose to live with. I remember once somebody came to the monastery, and this person was married, and they had just spoken with one of the senior monks and gotten some advice about how to deal with their spouse because they've been having some problems. And this person mentioned with amazement, they said, well, I'm amazed that these celibate monks can give such good advice about marital relationships. And well, actually, it's not so surprising because living in a monastery is a bit like being married to 20 people who you didn't pick and who you have to face day after day after day. And you need to learn how to at least tolerate them. So you learn a lot about relationships. And not necessarily the sweet, loving relationships, but those kind of painful, bitter, endless struggle kind of relationships. So then people come to the monastery and they lament about their painful, bitter struggles in their relationships. And the monks are like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Trust me. Yeah, been there, done that every day with 20 people. So it's not actually that far out of our domain of experience. Yeah, so you have to learn how to tolerate people. I remember one of the first monasteries I visited, I spoke to the abbess about these things, and she said, one of the great things about monastic life is that you can't write anybody off. So in our ordinary life, if somebody really annoys us, then we can just write them off and remove them from our life and get along perfectly well without them. You just stop talking to that person. You don't go to the places that they go. You avoid their friends and so on. And the person is just gone from your life. You can write them off. Done. Dead to me. Not so easy in monasteries. You're like, okay, this Bhante Sudaso guy is kind of a jerk. I'm just going to write him off. And then you go down for morning puja, and there he is, Bhante Sudaso, sitting right next to you. And you go in to get your breakfast, and there's Bhante Sudaso in front of you in the line. And then you go out to work, and there's Bhante Sudaso taking your favorite shovel. And you just can't write anybody off. So at some point, we learn how to tolerate each other. Or people disrobe and go off and resume living a blasé life and doing whatever it is they do. That happens relatively often, actually. But otherwise, you learn how to tolerate each other. You learn how to tolerate people. And you learn how to tolerate situations. You learn how to tolerate environments and conditions that you otherwise wouldn't necessarily be willing to put up with. And this builds up a strength of mind. It's like building calluses on your skin. Calluses are something I'm starting to become familiar with again after wielding a shovel more or less continuously for the past few days. Ayasoma's laughing because she knows exactly what I'm talking about. So how does a callus form? When you constantly put painful pressure on a certain part of your skin, then your skin becomes thicker and tougher and stronger in response. So that's what it's like. You tolerate difficult people, difficult situations, and your mind becomes stronger. It becomes tougher. It becomes more capable of withstanding what we thought we could not withstand. The tolerance. Especially tolerating other people's viewpoints and opinions. So you have to learn how to tolerate the way other people see the world, the way other people think about the world. And sometimes you just have to come to accept that you see things differently from others. And learn how to not make a problem out of that. It's like, okay, you call this pink, I call it purple. Doesn't really matter so much, does it? Not such a big deal, maybe. We can live with this. And the final aspect of khanti that I like to address is forgiveness. So it's forgiving each other for our errors, for our mistakes, for our unskillful conduct, even our unwholesome and harmful conduct. We forgive each other. And we forgive ourselves. So it's recognizing that as long as we are unenlightened, then we will do unenlightened things. We will behave like unenlightened beings. This is not surprising. If we reflect as far back as we can remember, we can think of countless unwholesome, unskillful, inappropriate things that we've done. Countless. So it shouldn't come as any surprise that other people also do countless inappropriate things. So we understand that this is coming from insanity. It's coming because we are not enlightened, which means that we are crazy. We are mentally deranged. We actually think that doing harmful things is a good idea sometimes. We actually think that cultivating unwholesome qualities is a good idea sometimes. How mind-bogglingly absurd is that? But it's because we're crazy. And we have really bad habits. And it's really hard for us to break those habits and to develop sanity. And it's really hard for everybody else as well. So when others make mistakes, we forgive them. And when we make mistakes, we forgive ourselves. And we seek to make amends with others. We seek to make up for the errors that we've done. So forgiveness, being willing to forgive, whether it's a minor fault or a major fault, being willing to forgive. That said, forgiveness does not mean idiocy. If somebody repeatedly hurts you, forgiveness does not mean that you open yourself up for them to hurt you again. Forgiveness means that you hold no grudge towards them. You hold no resentment. You hold no ill will. But nonetheless, if somebody is dangerous, then stay away. But without hating them, without resenting them, without wishing harm for them, Just acknowledging, oh, that person is deranged, making bad choices because of their craziness. Well, that's too bad. I hope they get better. I hope they develop wisdom and compassion so that they stop making mistakes. And the same for ourselves. When we make mistakes and we reflect back and we're like, oh, wow, that was a big mistake. I said something really offensive. I did something harmful. I wasted a lot of time. I slept through the meditation. Whatever it is. We reflect and we're like, oh, well, of course I did. I'm delusional and I'm overflowing with defilements. Of course I did those things. That's not surprising at all. Poor little buddy. Poor little buddy made mistakes because he's all crazy and stuff. May he get better. May he develop wisdom and compassion, little buddy. It's okay, little buddy. You'll get better. It makes it a lot easier when we reflect that it's because people are sick. They're not evil. They're sick. Spiritually sick. Us too. So we forgive others and we wish for them to attain awakening. And we forgive ourselves and we wish for ourselves to attain awakening. Not holding a grudge, not holding ill will, not holding on to resentment towards anyone for anything. So I think that's all I have to say on the subject of khanti for this evening. So at this time, if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bhante, for sharing these words of Dhamma. So a lot of hilarity has ensued in the live chat, especially with being married to 20 people.
Without benefits, I should clarify. Married without benefits for 20 people.
Exactly. So there's lots of lines of ha 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 ha. Adriana says, okay, this might be a brilliant idea for a reality TV show.
Okay, so I think this is about the 50th time that someone suggested we make monastic life into a reality TV show.
Previously, it would be very boring. We have not that reality TV shows are interesting. I don't know. I would not know because I haven't, I don't watch them. Probably it's the nature of reality TV to be not exciting. So maybe it's very suitable for monastics. So let's do that. Okay, and Kevin says, ha ha ha, never thought of it like that. It's like having 20 roommates. What a nightmare. Not nightmare, sorry. Great opportunity to practice. Yasmin is also amused and says, I love this talk so much. Jen says, what if others' views are harmful to others? Are we opposed to try to change those views or just be tolerant?
So tolerance doesn't mean that you stop improving the conditions of others. So, for example, if somebody in front of you starts torturing someone, tolerance doesn't mean that you just stand there and say like, oh yeah, go ahead, it's fine. No, not at all. You still have the function of wisdom, which knows this is not appropriate. And you have the function of compassion, which wishes to alleviate the suffering of others. And therefore, you make an effort to intervene for the benefit of both the victim and the abuser. Because you know that both people are being harmed in the situation. And if you intervene, then you can improve conditions for both of them. So this is not in any way advocating inaction in the face of injustice, not at all. So Yeah, if somebody is expressing views that are harmful and that are causing harm, then yeah, you absolutely should point it out. Find the right time and place, the right method, the right way to point it out. But definitely do what you can. Yeah, this is one of the elements of Buddhist practice. So the Buddha, in a number of places in the suttas, the Buddha, he says that it is wholesome not just to refrain from killing, but to speak in praise of not killing. Not just to refrain from stealing, but to speak in praise of refraining from stealing, and so on. So it's more than just, well, I am a perfect little angel who follows the precepts, but who cares what everybody else does? That's not Buddhist practice. Buddhist practice is also speaking openly about what is wholesome and what is good and what is beneficial. Okay.
Thank you. And Kevin says, I'm getting a little worried about all the hard labor y'all are doing with such limited eating. Are you getting enough calories? Do we need to send more pizza?
Well, I never turned down an offer of pizza. So if that's what will bring faith and joy to your mind, then may your mind be filled with faith and joy. But yeah, I mean, I haven't fainted yet. And Ayasoma is starting to get a little bit tired, so she stopped pushing me as hard as she was a day or two ago. We actually had half a day off today, which was almost restful.
All right. Well, thank you for your concern, Kevin. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And Jens asks, Bante, can you speak of the balance of patience and the sense of urgency that comes from Samvega?
Yeah. So it's recognizing that although the seeds of practice take time to ripen, we still need to be diligent in sowing those seeds, in watering those seeds, in nurturing them, and pulling up the weeds around them, and so on. Because otherwise, they will either take much longer, or they won't produce as good a fruit, or they might not produce fruit at all. So we still have that sense of the importance of diligently engaging in our practice, but also recognizing that results take time. You're not going to attain awakening instantaneously. Theoretically possible, but realistically it takes a long time. So patience is recognizing that it's going to take time. But Samvega is that sense of like, no, I need to do this. So you do it, but you do it knowing that results will come whenever they come. So we're not concerned with the results, we're concerned with doing the process with diligence, persistence, and faith. Okay?
All right. And Marielle says, it's funny because I have previously thought about this, like seeing the videos, I was like, they're kind of married, but not really, but kind of really, but not really. And Elaine apparently says that I thought the same thing, thinking Ayaso and Bante interact like an old married couple.
Though, ironically, we've been getting that since the first day we met. So I think it's a past life karma thing. We've always had this like
brother and sister.
Yeah, it's more of a brother-sister thing.
Yeah.
It's always been that way.
And on Monday, we will have another husband joining us, Bante Jayasara.
Yes. Yeah, Bante Jayasara will be staying with us for about a month.
Yeah.
Coming up soon.
And we also have another wife upstairs. So
she's leaving us in a couple of days.
Yes. So we have lots of, we're all in open relationships, apparently.
Apparently, Buddhist monastics are swingers.
Yeah. Whoa. Hopefully that won't be cropped and you just
Don't take that one out of context.
Yes. And Elaine says, my dad is that 91-year-old likable guy that everyone loves. Oh, that's so cute. And Kevin is encouraging people to practice dana. So if you're able, you can visit the BI site to support the monastery and these wonderful teachings. That's what he's saying. So if you'd like to do so, you can go on buddhistinsights.com/donate. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And Julia says, in my experience, the less judgmental I am, the less things I have to forgive. Judgmentless is one of the tools that helps to improve my patience skill quite a lot.
Yeah, another thing that's important to keep in mind on that and learning how to be less judgmental is always to keep in mind that we are seeing the world through one perspective. But it's not necessarily the only perspective, and it's not necessarily the right perspective. So we see things in one way, and another person sees things in another way, and other people see it in their own ways as well. So not to be too quick to pass judgment, because what another person is doing, they're doing it because that's what makes sense to them to do. They're believing what they believe because that's what makes sense to them to believe. From their perspective, they're doing things that are reasonable and appropriate. So not to be too quick to pass judgment, at least not until we've had a chance to learn what's going on in that person's mind, what their motives are, what their reasoning is, what their conditioning is. Not until we get a better sense as to their perspective on things.
And Adriana and Ron are both happy about Bante J coming on Monday. So are we. So it's great.
Yep. He's already texting us about his enthusiasm to get out the wheelbarrow and shovel.
And Jen says, thank you. And what if they justify these views under their religious doctrine? Sorry, the last few days, I've been involved in some debates where some people are justifying what I would call immoral. Are we supposed to try to change those views or debate them at all?
Well, it's quite challenging when you're dealing across religious traditions, because someone can say that their religious belief is whatever they want it to be. And there's not really any conversation that can be had there. So, yeah, I mean, what are you going to do in that case? It's quite challenging. So I remember at one point I was debating with somebody, and this person kept espousing a viewpoint which in my mind was quite uncompassionate. And so I kept working through the conversation, bringing out different angles, trying to point out the fact that their viewpoint was not compassionate. And then eventually the person just straight out admitted that they weren't interested in being compassionate. And I was like, well, okay, well, that suddenly clarifies all of their viewpoints because they weren't interested in compassion in the first place. So they actually didn't have any problem whatsoever with their viewpoint being one that was uncompassionate. And for me, that was the end of the conversation, because you can't make any headway with somebody like that. So if you're talking to somebody though, and you can come to an agreement on basic moral principles, basic principles of kindness, compassion, generosity, goodwill, and so on, then you can build up from there. So this is where I tend to have a lot of success in interacting with people of other religions. Is to try to find that common shared moral foundation. And of course, there's going to be some differences. So for example, in Buddhism, consuming intoxicants is considered immoral, whereas In other religions, it often isn't. It's often not prohibited or proscribed. And there can be other minor variations, but a lot of the basic core things, like not killing and not stealing and not lying and so on, are pretty universal. Not completely universal. So one of my family members, despite claiming to be Christian, seems to have decided that the commandment about not killing doesn't actually apply. So this came to light when I was having a conversation with her about killing, and she just straight out said that she doesn't see anything wrong with killing as long as it's for a good reason. And once again, that was basically the end of the conversation, because then that's where it hits that wall of this is just what the person believes, and there's nothing that can be done about it. But other times, if you try to find that shared sense of basic goodness, then you can have a conversation starting from that shared foundation of basic goodness and go from there. But yeah, if you do get to that point where somebody just sticks firmly to this is my belief and I'm not changing it, well, you just can't do anything with that. So you just change the subject, just drop it. There's nothing you can do at that point.
And Gabriela says, "Oh dear, that's rough about your exchange with but the killing is right." But Gabriela also asks, "I work with children regularly and I have no problem working with children and having patience with them. They are learning." I think there's something coming. But I have less patience for adults. How can I develop it?
View adults as children. That's how. Adults are also children. They just have bigger bodies. And we expect more from them. But otherwise, just view them as children.
And Maria says, "But the hard thing about patience is that you can only practice it when there's no other options." Like all the other perfections, I feel you can practice them beforehand.
No, you practice patience all the time. Like when the monk keeps leaving long pauses in his speech. You practice patience during those pauses. Or maybe you're not. Maybe you're there on the edge of your seat going, what's he going to say? What's he going to say? Then, of course, then you're not practicing patience. But you practice patience all the time. And in fact, you can intentionally incorporate patience into your daily life. Noticing whenever your mind starts getting in the agitated, like, when's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? I want it. What's next? What's next? When your mind starts getting in that mode, and just stop. Be like, no, it'll happen when it happens. So just relaxing back into waiting. But waiting without expectation, just accepting. This is the way it is right now. Maybe it's not interesting. Maybe it's not exciting. It's okay. Doesn't matter. Doesn't need to be interesting or exciting. Maybe it's not what I want. Doesn't matter. Maybe it is what I want. Doesn't matter. So it's accepting this moment just as it is. You can do that anytime. You don't need certain conditions in order to develop patience. You can develop patience all the time. This is also why it's important to keep in mind that the different aspects of the word khanti. It's not just patience. It's also endurance, acceptance, tolerance, and forgiveness. So you can always practice some shade of this word in any situation. So even if you think maybe patience is not applicable at a certain time, well, how about endurance or acceptance or tolerance? Does one of those apply? And maybe you're still practicing khanti.
Thank you. Marielle says, but you see, I'm forced to practice it when I'm anxious by things, like the monk taking longer to talk, but I understand. Well, I don't really understand, but I understand it's the one that is hardest for me.
Well, there you go. It's your working point, which means you should put extra effort into working on it. It's actually a real gift when we discover what's hard for us in practice, because then we know what we need to put extra effort into developing. Okay?
And Gabriela also asks, I often lose patience with myself, expecting me to do things that are far beyond what I expect from others. How do we encourage ourselves to have patience for our own shortcomings?
So there's a lovely quote from the Buddhist movie Fight Club. The quote goes, "You are not a unique snowflake." The quote goes on from there and rapidly devolves into foul language of various sorts, which I'm not going to repeat. But that one quote, "You are not a unique snowflake," recollect that. You are not different from other people. Okay? You're exactly the same as everybody else. So it is utterly ridiculous to have different expectations for yourself than for others. And it is utterly absurd to be more patient with others than with yourself. You are not different from others. You are not a unique snowflake. Okay?
And Jen says, I lose patience in these religious debates. I think I need to take a break. Debates are such a guilty pleasure of mine, though.
Yeah, and actually what I found is that religious debates are very rarely productive. Very rarely. There can be some value to have conversations, discussions, with a sincere interest in trying to learn more about each other's viewpoints. So, for example, up until the pandemic started and threw a wrench in everybody's plans, Ayasoma and I would regularly attend the Buddhist Catholic dialogues at the Archdiocese of New York. So these really lovely things that happen about once a month, where they get some Buddhists, mostly monks of different traditions, but also some lay practitioners and lay teachers as well. They get some Buddhists and some Catholic priests, and we all, sometimes they have a Protestant or two just to spice things up, or a Jew or something just to spice things up, but it's usually Catholics. And we sit around and we talk about different topics, how they are viewed through Buddhism and how they're viewed through Catholicism predominantly, and again, sometimes other shades of Christianity. And there's no attempt to try to prove who's right or to argue about whose religion is better than whose religion. Of course, Buddhism is better. We already know that, but we're not there to try to prove that. We're just there to talk. Like the problem of suffering. Why is there suffering in the world? What does Buddhism say about this? What does Catholicism say about this? Oh, how interesting. Oh, that's nice. So these things are similar, but these things are different. Isn't that fascinating? And we just chat about it in a friendly way. But there's no hostility. There's no trying to prove your point or trying to convince anybody of anything. It's just, I see it this way. You see it that way. Oh, isn't that interesting? We have some similarities and some differences. Oh, isn't that interesting? We drink some tea, we eat some snacks, we chat for a while, and then we part ways in a friendly way. So it's actually really lovely. So I would encourage you, if you're going to have religious conversations, try to do it with that spirit, with that attitude. That kind of like lovely, friendly chat where you hang out with your buddies and eat snacks. And it's like, oh, so you see it that way. How fascinating. Well, I see it this way. Isn't this interesting? Rather than like, you are wrong. I am right. My views are better than your views. That doesn't make friends and it doesn't achieve anything useful most of the time. Okay? Anything else?
Yes, Gabriella asking, when opening the endurance and tolerance for others who are so diametrically opposed to me, how do I stop engaging the comparative mind?
Just don't. Just don't go into comparison. They are what they are. You are what you are. All of you are unenlightened. End of story. Like you don't need to compare yourself to others. You just need to look at your own mind and see what needs to be worked on and work on it. That's all.
She says, easier said than done.
I know, that's why you need to practice samadhi. So samadhi practice is incredibly important because it's the best way to learn how to control your thoughts. As your samadhi gets better, then you learn how to have a silent mind, which is so restful. You can go throughout your day with a silent mind. It's just fabulous. It's almost as good as napping. Okay, who am I kidding? Nothing's as good as napping, but it's pretty good. You can have a silent mind all the time. You just turn it on when you need it. Then when you're done, turn it off. The mind is silent. Work on your samadhi practice, and you'll find that stopping the comparative mind gets much easier.
Gabriella is also saying, I love samadhi. It's my favorite meditation point. Mindfulness is not as useful for me as samadhi is, but it's still important.
So mindfulness and samadhi go hand in hand. If you practice samadhi but without mindfulness, then it's not so useful. It's not particularly conducive to insight. And it's also difficult to bring that samadhi power into everyday life. So when samadhi is developed in tandem with mindfulness, with sharp, intense mindfulness, then you'll be able to carry that samadhi power with you as you go throughout your day. So earlier, I was outside planting flowers, and at some point it just occurred to me, like, oh, my mind has been quiet this whole time. Like, oh, how lovely. So noticing like the feeling of my hands moving, picking up the flower, putting it in the ground, tucking in the dirt. Noticing the feeling of standing up, moving over to the next place, kneeling down. And the mind was silent. So I really recommend working on that. Working on building up the connection between mindfulness and samadhi. Cultivating them in tandem. And as you go throughout your day, try to keep your samadhi power. And the link is through mindfulness. Also, if you want to get deep samadhi, you need to have strong mindfulness. Otherwise, you'll just fall into torpor. You can't get jhana if your mindfulness is not extremely strong. Otherwise, you can drift off into miccha samadhi, which is not useful. Okay.
Okay. Gabriella is just adding, that's true, Bhante. I'm going to try and intensely develop both. Naturally, though, as my OCD kind of already makes me hyper aware of things, it's less prominent than samadhi, which I have to work to get.
You also need to relax.
And Marielle says, I used to work for an organization that in over 90 countries opened up spaces for interfaith collaboration, and it was beautiful because it took the things people have in common rather than discuss their differences. And the thing is that every person that came to the office to visit or the like, either indigenous leaders or Muslim leaders or Hindu leaders, they all had a presence that felt like peace. Very profound. And I feel it's because the people from each religion who wants to do the hard job are more advanced spiritually. Yeah,
Yeah,
nice.
I also find that the sort of people who are interested in interfaith dialogue also tend to be the people who have more advanced wisdom and compassion practice than the average spiritual practitioner, than the average religious person. So like the really hardline fundamentalist, fire and brimstone, burn them with hellfire kind of people, they're never setting foot in an interfaith dialogue room. It's just not going to happen. Very unlikely. So the kind of people who are interested in interfaith dialogue in the first place are the kind of people who already have some degree of openness, tolerance, goodwill, equanimity, which means they've already developed some wholesome qualities, some wholesome states of mind.
Yes, I have to say that I also enjoy a lot the Buddhist Catholic dialogue. It's very nice, very beautiful, also not trying to convince someone else. And, you know, obviously, as Bhante said, we keep on thinking that obviously Buddhism is the best, and they keep on thinking that Catholicism is the best. But there is also a sort of appreciation that starts because you start understanding why people act in the way that they act, how they behave, where it's based from. Instead of assumptions, you actually have an understanding. So it's quite lovely. All right. And Gabriela says, one day I will relax. I'll be the best relaxer ever. That's great.
I will try really hard to relax.
It's a good aspiration, though.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And all right. I think that's all for this evening. So may we all be the best relaxers ever. And may all beings attain awakening. And may we all practice patience with ourselves and others. Thank you, Bhante, for teaching. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And see you tomorrow at 8 a.m. for Sutta study. Have a great